Oh man! All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Man to Man Father's Fire Edition. And I'm telling you, if you guys could hear the pre-show stuff, you would be dying. In fact, I
man.
probably should just go live next time.
This show is already off the rails, man.
It's all good. Well, good evening, guys. I'm super excited to have you guys. For those of you guys new to the show, or just as a reminder, we have Sean Knauff. You see him as Shawnee Boy. Antoine Brown in the lower left. Or I can't even tell my direction. And of course, Mike Lewis. And Mike Lewis and Antoine are like our token models. They're all looking suave, debonair with the cool hairstyles. And oh man, well, I'm super excited to have you. Look at him. He's still, man, we need makeup, hair. Can you please help this guy? Oh, man. You can tell it's always a good conversation with these guys. So I'm super excited. Tonight, we are going to talk about discipline. So I have to give you guys some background for the impetus of tonight's conversation. And so, as you guys know, I have 6 kids, and Judy and I adopted 2 about 12 years ago, and they came into our homes about 8 and 9. And it's been kind of fun because they're now starting to not only look forward in their life and starting to pursue some of their dreams, but they're also looking backwards. And so this weekend, Sencha was pulling out some of the documents from the early stages of when we brought her and her husband, her brother, to our house, and she was, we had them in some counseling because there was some PTSD and some reactive attachment disorder that we were working through, and in one of the notes, the counselor said not responsive to discipline, and she goes, "Why were you disciplining me?" and I'm like, well, first of all, that's just part of being a parent and a child. But second of all, as you were coming into our home, there was a lot of trauma that you were working through, which caused you to be rebellious and not want to do the things that the other kids were doing, or just wanted to, not do what dad said, right? And so she said, I go, and one of the things that we were really struggling with is you would lie over little stuff. I mean, stuff that didn't matter. I mean, I could look outside and tell you the sky was blue and you tell me it purple. I mean, it just was really crazy. And so we were trying to figure out, one, how to work through the trauma, but two, how to teach you and also connect with you in a way that enabled you to learn and to grow and move past that pain, but also put you in a position where you were living to the same standards in our home. And it was a really challenge. And she goes, well, why would you discipline me for lying when you know why I was lying? And I'm like, oh, that's a really good question. I said, you got to realize that discipline doesn't mean punishment. Discipline means that we are teaching you how to act appropriately in certain situations, but there is often, in conjunction with that teaching, also consequences. And so a lot of times, you as kids look at the consequences as a punishment, and you forget, or we as dads don't do a good job of teaching in a way that they understand that the discipline coming to the table, or to this situation, is designed to help you through that situation and help you become better, to help our family become better. But there's also those consequences associated with it. So that's the background of why I wanted to talk about discipline, because it can be a real challenging thing in your home of, how do you discipline? Do you discipline all of your kids exactly the same? which that became a real challenge for us because, we had our 4 children that were in our home from babies, and they knew what to expect. They were attached to us versus these kids coming in at 8 and 9 that had broken hearts and broken expectations. And now they're trying to connect with this new dad in a way that, bridges the gap, but also gets through some pain. So that's the background. So I thought I'd lay that out there and say, all right, guys, let's talk about discipline in the home, how you guys have worked through it, how you've talked to your kids about it, how you've maybe tag teamed with your wife to discipline your kids, but also more importantly, or as importantly, discipline with the spirit of love. Discipline with the spirit of helping the family come together in unity and to become one as a family. So with that said, there's our groundwork. Who wants to jump in first? Mike's like, I don't even want to take it.
So who has the next less kids? I have 2.
I think that's going to be Antoine.
Yeah. Well, Mike is right behind Jody, so I think he should go next.
Oh man! Oh wow! Yeah, that's a loaded topic for sure, man. Because like you said, we deal with our children differently. It's my oldest is he'll be 21 in November. I was just having a conversation with him earlier today, and one of the things that stands out to me about all of my children, but what really stands out to me with him is how the discipline, however I had to discipline him as he was growing up, the impact that it made on his life as a young man today, and his understanding of why I would do certain things, right? I very seldom, it's almost like a laughing joke in my home, but every form of discipline for me in my home is a lesson, right? So it's like I'm that parent where every single time something comes up, a lecture in their eyes has to come with it, right? Because I'm always trying to see if you have paid attention to the principle attached to the discipline. So for example, I was having a conversation with our oldest daughter yesterday. She came in from work and she asked a question, and I'm honestly, it wasn't shocking, but at the same time, I'm like, where did that come from? Right? So she asked a question. She says, why? I mean, this was like so random, you guys. She said, why haven't you and mom taught me what you've learned about business? And I said, huh? She said, why haven't you and mom taught me what you learned about business? And so she was just talking, right? She says, because as I get older, I would want to be set up where I wouldn't have to struggle in my adult life. So I'm like, ooh, that's real good. I said, but are you mature enough for the answer? Like for her, this was discipline, right? For her, it was discipline. But I said, are you mature enough for the answer? And so she said, yes, I am. I said, okay. I said, it's not that we haven't taught you everything that we've learned and what we're learning. I said, the challenge is you're not coachable enough to receive it from us because we're your parents. I says, however, you're going to school right now for cosmetology. Your mom has been in the beauty industry for 20 plus years. How many times have you sat at that salon and learn from her and ask questions, opposed to going on Facebook where 90% of the stories that you see there are fabricated anyway, right? That for me, that's a form of discipline for me, right? Because again, I want my children to understand every principle that's attached to the process of implementing discipline in your life. And I will never forget, and I've said this before, and Antoine, I learned it from Pastor Brown, and he's always said whenever there is a confusion or whenever there's a consequence, you can always trace it back to a violated principle. And so as a father, I'm always looking to inspire the desire to locate the violated principle. Right. And if that comes in the form of a lecture, then so be it. But when you get older and you're willing to accept the lecture, then you will see that the discipline had a designated goal in mind. Right. So I've learned as I get, older, if you will, I've learned that discipline, of course, comes in different forms. Like, for example, with my youngest boys right now, my youngest son is celebrating his 6th birthday today, right? He's very vocal. So sometimes discipline for him comes in a different form, right? Because he has no filter. He has zero filter. And so it doesn't always require a spanking, but it does require that firm look to say, if you don't cut it out, something else is coming with it. You get what I'm saying? And so it just, like you said, is discipline comes in different forms based on where your children are at this, in the season of their lives. So it's tough at times, though. It's tough because as a father, sometimes you want to be stern and say, look, you need to get your tail in gear or we're getting ready to have a problem. But then there's times when my wife will step in and say, I got this, right? And I have to be man enough to allow her to discipline in the way that she feels that they need to be disciplined at that time. So it kind of depends on the situation, I think.
All right. Oh, Antoine pulled out the belt. All right, let's see where this is going.
Bro, that was classic.
Man.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh, that was funny. Bird, how did you get that off? That was magic.
It's TV magic, man. TV magic.
Man, listen, you took that thing off like booty tag, man. I did not see that coming.
He's a master at it. He's had practice.
Oh man.
Man, you know what? This is a very interesting topic because I grew up on these. You know what I'm saying? I grew up on these, and but it's, you know what, Jody, is I was thinking about what you said though. It's very interesting because I think that a lot of times what happens to us in our development and our growth from generation to generation is we tend to gravitate to what we were raised on or what we were accustomed to, and we're quicker to do that than we are to really assess each child and how each child what method of discipline is most effective for each child. And I remember, man, I mean, earlier in my parenting days, I was very quick to go to spanking, and it didn't matter which child, any situation. And I got 3, it didn't matter which child in any situation. And it took me a few years before I realized that, first of all, I tried to use spanking as a last resort. It wasn't like, I think you lied, we did a little investigation first, you know what I'm saying? Just, we get a beating and it's like, I didn't even do nothing, but I got to a place where I said, okay, you know what, where this would normally merit a spanking, I decided to look at the situation and talk to the my child, whichever one it was, and try to figure out what happened, what's going on, where is this coming from, where is this behavior coming from, And then I decided to form a discipline that was better and was more effective for them, because I had this cousin, man. I had this cousin that he got in trouble one time, and he went and got the belt and was like, I think you need this, like just money. And he just took it like a champ, so that wasn't effective for him. That wasn't even discipline. I mean, it hurt, but he was like, once I get over this pain, I'm good to go, And so that wasn't effective for him. And I had a child similar to that. I mean, it hurt. But he would take it, and it was just like, after that, I'm good. So then I had to start looking at other things like, okay, he's not being rehabilitated, he's a repeat criminal, The system is not working, you know what I'm saying? I had to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with him? And so I think when it comes to discipline, a lot of times, and Mike, you said this, but a lot of times what we don't see in discipline is the first word in most dictionaries when you look at discipline is train. It's train. It's not punish. It's train. And punishment is a form of discipline, yes, because you're taking something away from them, or you're causing some sort of discomfort to them, pain, whatever you want to call it. But training is what discipline is all about. Is correcting those things that they did wrong, so that when they approach this situation again, they're more likely now to do the right thing. And so that's what I had to think about when it comes to discipline. How am I going to get them to get to this point again where they messed up and make a better choice? And Mike used the word lecture. Man, my dad, man, let me tell you what my dad did. First of all, I got to do this. He took the belt, right? He took this belt, not this one, but he took a belt and he cut it off about like right here. Cut it off right here. Then he cut these little like slits on the end of it.
Ooh.
And now don't, you know what I mean? I'm a grown man. He's not still doing this to me, So not, back in the day, we didn't know, it was probably a thin line between child abuse and just a good beat, So I don't believe my dad crossed the line, you know what I'm saying? But he had a special belt for me, right? And he showed it to me. He was like, I just want you to see this, because next time you do something like you just did, I'm going to use this on you, And I'm like, okay, so I was like, well, I'm not doing that no more. But that was a part of a lecture, a whole lecture. And so I got to the place where he was getting ready to lecture me, and I was like, could you just beat me? Could you please just beat me?
And get it over with.
Yeah, because the lecture was just like, that was torture. It was this. I was like, please just beat me.
30 minutes of droning.
Right.
It's like blah 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 blah. It's like Charlie Brown teacher.
Yeah, that teacher. Wah, wah, wah. I got to the place, man, where I was just good because I didn't want to get no lecture, and so that was effective for me. It was effective for me. I mean, that, and then a couple of pops with that belt, the slits on the end of it, I was good to go. But that's the thing about it, man. That train part is a very crucial part of discipline, and I think that a lot of parents make the mistake of going right to a go-to. And I had 3 children. Well, I still have 3 children, but I have 3 children, and each one of them was totally different. Mike talked about that a little bit. The youngest one is different from the oldest one, and the daughter is a little different. But I got 3 children that are totally different. And I could not use the same method of discipline for each one of them.
Yeah.
I couldn't. And I had to learn that.
That's a really interesting thing too, because I'm the oldest of 8 kids, right? So my dad served 20 years in the Navy, and I served 20 years under him. And it was all yes sir, no sir, stand at attention, and try to get a 3-year-old, 4-year-old to stand at attention for 30 seconds, let alone a minute. Man, I'm telling you, it was crazy, right? And it's funny because we had, like, your dad had the belt. We actually had a paddle that was named Big Al, and it was on the fridge. And man, when Big Al came out, you knew to run, right? And I remember one time my brother Sean, he's like, Mom said, go get the paddle, or I'm going to go get the paddle, and I'll be right back. So he ran into the bedroom and stuck a bunch of hardbound books in his pants and came out. It's like, all right, I'm ready. And my mom just started laughing. I mean, she's like, how can you spank him now, And it was interesting to see the transition from anger, I'm going to kill you, to I'm going to, I'm dying laughing. Now, how do I discipline you because I'm laughing so hard? And it created this environment where my mom just sat down with us and she started talking and started, training and teaching. Guys, why are you doing that? Really? Come on. Why? You're better than that, and just walk through this. But it was really interesting to watch the transition from, oh God, I'm going to kill you, to sheer laughter. And I think a lot of times that happens as we parent our kids, because sometimes we go in all hot, and as we learn the real background or the kids surprise you, it changes the tempo of the room. And I think that's an important thing. I think a lot of times with discipline, we tend to go in, like Antoine said, with our first reaction, instead of trying to understand what happened behind the scenes that led to that. And if you can tap into that background information, you can create an environment where you can really teach the kids and get them to self-reflect on what had just happened and how they could have handled it better. And in that process, they become better because they've learned through the experience, because you took the time to teach them.
Yeah.
No, that is so key, Jody, because when you when you mentioned the name of the paddle, I had two, one, well, it wasn't a paddle, it was a belt though, but but they were the name of the smaller one was Never Again, but the thicker one was Don't Think About It. And so whenever the kids would do something, one of the other kids would say, never again, and they'll go and get it or whatever. But no, you learn you learn that it's not always as effective, to go that route immediately. So yeah.
Shawnee, we're waiting for you now, buddy. Bring us.
I'm just taking this all in, man. You guys have older kids than me, so I'm still learning. But I want to say, I grew up around a lot of craziness. Like, my parents were divorced real young. I was passed back and forth between my parents. My dad was in jail. I was in foster homes, passed back and forth between my aunts, grandmas. And to be honest with you, I never really lived anywhere for a whole year until I met my wife when I was 19. And I was a crazy kid, but there was never really a whole lot of discipline in my life. Like, I remember when I was a little kid and my dad would be like at home and we'd be acting up and he'd take his belt and like snap it in our face or something. And I remember getting it a couple of times, but I feel like when my wife told me she was pregnant, I was like, oh crap. But the thing is, it's like, I was a karate teacher for 20 years and people used to pay me to teach their kids discipline. So in order for me to be a person to do that, even though I really had to learn that in my own life, self-discipline and learn discipline, the word disciple comes from discipline, the root word. And so it means you're right. It means to teach, or you're a student of discipline, a student of learning. And I think, for me, it's been a journey going from one thing to another to understand my kids, for them to understand me, and for us to have enough love and respect in the house for all of us all together, that we don't have to get all crazy, even though every once in a while, it comes to that. But I'm saying, like, I think my goal as a dad is to respect my kids and get them to respect me, so I don't have to go down that road. Now, my kids are still real young, man. So I got like a lot of good things to look forward to, hopefully. So I don't know. I feel like for me personally, like I tried to do the spanking thing and it just disagreed with everyone around me, and I couldn't stick to my guns, even though the belt's still sitting there. I haven't spanked my kids or anything in a long time. The last time I spanked my daughter was a story and a half, but I haven't had to go there in a pretty long time, and I'm happy about it because there's enough respect now. Like, the kids know I'll go there and I'll be like, you don't want to get all crazy, do you, like, about this? And they'll calm down because they know I'm not playing around. You know what I mean? Like, my wife will threaten them. She'll be like, your dad's going to come and get you, or you don't make your dad mad. And then they know that they better just knock it off. And my daughter is very sweet to me, and we have a real good relationship, and I don't want to have to go down in that department, even though she's in 9th grade. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. So to be honest with you, I'm still a student myself, I had to learn quite a few things about being a dad on my own. And I asked a lot of questions to, people around me, friends. One of my best friends has 4 kids. I learned a lot from him. He comes from a Mennonite family. It's kind of like Amish.
Yeah.
And they're very tight knit, and they have a lot of discipline in their house. And I learned a lot of things just from hanging out with them. But I think for me personally, like my goal is to just have love in my house, have respect in my house, and for us to respect each other. And sometimes that means me being super patient. It means me teaching my kids, teaching my kids, even when I'm wrong, admitting that I'm wrong. Or I told my son a few months ago, I'm like, I don't know what to do right now, man. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Because he had me stuck on something he was doing, and I'm like, I was just clueless as to how to handle it. And I think by me being a little bit vulnerable with my kids here and there, they understand that I'm a human too, and sometimes they'll think twice. I think one of the reasons why I kind of learned to be like that, I guess, is I had a pastor tell me, because I asked my pastor a long time ago when my son was real young. He's 10 now. When he was like maybe like 4, I remember asking my pastor, like, I want to be a good dad. Like, how do I discipline my kids in the right way? Like, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? How do I know if I'm on the right track? Because I'm hearing from this, my mother-in-law disagrees with my dad, my mom disagrees with my wife disagrees with me, and it's just this like vicious circle of me trying to figure out the right way. And it seemed like every time I take my own stance on it, it always became I just wasn't satisfied with it, or my kids would suffer. Like, I remember spanking my son one time, and he was just looking at me, and I'm like, I'm not hitting him hard enough. And he's just like staring at me, and I'm like, what the heck? And he's like, you done? And I'm like wailing this kid, and my wife's like, you're gonna put bruises on him or something. And I'm like, man, this sucks. My daughter's the opposite. I tap her and she's whining, she's screaming. Yeah. But the thing is my pastor told me something that was very life-changing for me. I asked him, like, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? And he's like, from working in the church, he goes, I could tell you the dads that their kids like hang on them and love them and, are kind of like horse around with them a little bit. Those are the dads that have the kids respect and love and stuff. And if you get to that place, you're in good shape. And so I know if I got that going on, and I'm praying God every day leads me down the right road of disciplining my kids, because I don't know what I'm doing, bro. But I pray every day that I'm going on the right track, bro. So anyway.
Yeah,
But,
I really do think it's a process of learning, right? And I know a lot of times, like my wife, a lot of times she would say, "Look," she goes, "I know the initial response is X." She goes, "But when I've listened to the Spirit, when I've listened to my heart, it's always been to do the opposite of what my initial reaction is." And I've thought a lot about the story in the New Testament where the woman was taken in adultery and brought before the Savior with all these other accusing men, right? And he's like, "Look, they brought him and said, 'Look, here's this lady. She was caught in the very act. What should we do?'" Right? And he's like, "Well, what does the law say?" Right? And but it's interesting because what he did has really caused me to reflect as a dad of how I respond, because his response was not to say anything at first. And he knelt down and he drew in the sand. And I think what that did, and this is Jody's interpretation, is it gave him a spiritual timeout of being able to look at not only this woman, but also look at these men and come up with a response that would teach all of them simultaneously and teach them love in the process. And his response was, "Let he that is without sin throw the first stone." And their hearts were pricked. And I think that when we as dads can learn to take an emotional, a spiritual timeout and really try to tap into what our heart is telling us and how to respond and how to teach our children, they will respond in kind. But it takes discipline of ourselves to do that. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of times, we think about discipline as we have to train and teach our kids and exercise consequences, when sometimes the discipline is for ourselves. For us as dads to learn how we can be better men, how we can be better fathers, and how we can develop a kinder, gentler heart for our kids and develop an empathy that will bridge the gap of understanding and enable us to teach them in a way that will inspire growth.
I love that, Jody, because I'll tell you why. That reminds me of so many times that I learned like a spiritual truth about myself through one of my kids. And it's like, I can't tell you how many times that happened. And I felt like, when you have like a God moment where you're like, whoa, when you learn something that you can't quite put into words about just life, or for me, for myself, I learned stuff about my parents through my kids. Like, I have a really rough relationship with my mom, and she was really mean to me as a kid. She had a rough life. My grandfather beat my grandmother up so bad. He broke her jaw so bad. She had like jaw surgeries all through my childhood. She was really messed up. My grandmother raised 6 kids on her own. He just left her. And my mom was sort of like the roughneck of all the kids. I have an aunt who has like Asperger's, and the kids at school used to pick on her and stuff. And my mom used to like beat the crap out of these kids and start fights with people messing with her sister. And my mom's the kind of person, she doesn't put up with anyone's crap, and she will go for the jugular immediately. Like, she could be if she was a lawyer, she could beat Johnny Cochran at any pace. Like, I'm telling you. But I mean, my mom, when I was a kid, she was like all or nothing. Like, if you made a mistake, she'd whoop your butt. She'd throw me on the ground, throw me around stuff. But the thing is I didn't understand her at all growing up. I hated her till I was like 20, 27. I had a kid of my own, and, started thinking about stuff. And there has been some crazy things that God has taught me through my kids that has healed my relationship with my mom. And you know, when like it's what you said, dude, it's discipline all the way around. So that's deep stuff.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about. I mean, everything has just been really good, man. I got stuck on disciple when you talked about that, Sean, because that's really what we're supposed to be doing with our kids is making disciples, you know, and which is, you know, based on principles, you know, like Mike talked about, is based on principles, and I believe from the Word of God, you know, from the Bible. But I saw this powerful illustration on discipline or discipleship from this pastor at this church, and I'd never seen anything like this before. And what it showed me, well, I'll tell you what he did, and I'll tell you what it showed me. But he brought in like I don't know how many people were in the congregation, but he made sure everybody in the congregation had a sheet of paper, like a copy paper, 8.5 by 11. Made sure everybody had a sheet of paper, and he said, "I want everybody in here to make a paper airplane." And so, you know, everybody. He said, "No, nobody help anybody, but I want everybody in here to make a paper airplane." So they did the best they could. Some people made airplane, like, I mean, could fly all the way across the sanctuary, and some people's airplanes were horrible. You know, they just didn't know what they didn't have a clue how to make a paper airplane. So what he did was, he said he brought up the people who could fly their airplane at least 10 or more feet. He said, everybody that could fly their airplane at least 10 or more feet, I want you to come up here on the platform with me. So he had maybe about 20 people up there that could do it, you know, a really good airplane. And he said, now, I want you, he called up a couple of the people who couldn't do it. He said, I paired them up with the people who could fly at 10 or more feet. He said, I want you to show them how to make an airplane that can fly 10 or more feet. He said, no, go ahead and do it. I mean, it was the longest service I've ever seen in my life. But but before the service was over, and this is, you got to know this guy who did this too, to know this is just who he is. Before that service was over, everybody in that sanctuary knew how to fly an airplane at least 10 feet. And, you know, a lot of people were bored. They were like, okay, come on now. What is going on? We're not coming to church to make no paper airplanes. So, but at the end of it, the way he closed it out was so profound. It was so powerful. He said, that's discipline. He said, that's discipleship. He said, you know, one of the key elements of discipleship and discipline that we forget is patience. It's patience. Taking the time out to make sure that they know how to do things correctly. And when it comes to our children, a lot of times, you know, it's not that spanking is evil. I don't believe, I believe in spanking, you know, your child. I did it. I got it when I was a kid. You know, I don't believe it's evil, but I believe that it's in a lot of ways, for a lot of parents, it's the lazy way out. I didn't take the time to train my children, disciple them, discipline them, show them step by step how to be good, how to function, how to, why it's important to tell the truth in any situation. You know, why you shouldn't hit people. You know, what happens when this happens. You know, to be able to take the time out every day, come home, hey, come here, son, come here, daughter. So now we're going to talk. We're going to take a good half hour to 45 minutes out and just talk about some life issues. You know, I don't know too many parents that do that, but that's discipleship. So that when they come to that point where they're going to do something wrong, they're least likely to do it because of what they've been trained to do and not to do. And that's discipleship. And so I think that a lot of times spanking, and I know we're not talking about spanking, we're not, you know, talking against it or for it. It's not one of those kind of conversations. But I think a lot of times spanking is a lazy way out. You know, it's, you know what, why would you do something like that? You know, get over here. You know, you grab the belt. And then some parents, some dads probably walk around their house like this. You know, just this sign. Y'all hear that? remember that sound? Just, you know, that sound alone, when you know you did something, you hear that sound, it's like, oh no, your heart just dropped. You just, oh. But yeah, you know, I think that that's, you know, unfortunately for a lot of parents, there aren't enough of these type of things and classes going on for parents. You know, it's amazing. We have premarital counseling. You know, we have premarital, and some people have very extensive premarital counseling. You got to meet with them 6 sessions, 10 sessions before you marry the person, because they're going to try to go over as many scenarios as they can, as many examples, as many things as they can possibly think of for the couples to stay together. But there's nothing for children. There's not, I mean, I shouldn't say there's nothing. I don't know too many things where you prepare 2 people that are about to get married. What if you have children? You know, we're going to do 6 sessions for you guys getting together, but we're going to do another 6 sessions for some scenarios with children, because you're going to have children and you're going to need to know how to discipline them, how to disciple them. You know, don't just automatically go to the belt, you know, because everything does not merit that. I don't believe, I believe even when the Bible talks about sparing the rod spoils a child, I still believe that that's a very last resort. A lot of times, I think in most cases, the belt is for defiance, not just as a disciplinary tool, but defiance. You got a child that's just like so stubborn, you know, and they just decided, hey, you know what? I don't care what you say, you know, but I don't think it's always a go-to automatically.
You know, that I like that imagery, because you think about when the Savior took out the whip in the temple and cast out the money changers, he was casting out a system.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't
Yeah.
casting out individuals.
Right.
And every other example that you see in his life, it was always one-on-one, and it was always an invitation to do better, coupled with, I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are precious to me. And I think a lot of times we as dads don't do the, I love you and you're precious to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to walk through this. Yeah, you made a mistake, but that's okay. I'm here to walk with you through that experience. And I think it's really critical that we as dads create an environment where, like, unlike you or, you know, with the belt, obviously walking around with this, you know, mean demeanor, I'm going to smack you, right? Versus, you know, and some of us had that kind of dad, right? Straight up, some of us had that kind of dad versus a dad that is welcoming and loving despite your frailties as a young kid.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, my dad, and I'm joking about it, but when I think back on it, I can probably count on one hand how many times my dad had to spank me. You know, he didn't do that as a go-to.
Yeah.
I mean, I had some issues, man. You know what I'm saying? I was acting up, you know. So there were some times that I needed it. You know what I'm saying? And I remember getting it one time, man. And I think I was about 11 or 12 years old. That's the last spanking I remember. And I think I was about 11, 12 years old, man. And I'll never forget it, man. After it was over, I went in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I'm just, you know, cleaning myself up, you know, just putting myself back together. And I literally looked in the mirror and I said, you know what, man, this is not worth it. Just please stop, you know? And I think that's the last spanking I ever got, you know? But my dad he was a different kind of guy though. He wasn't one of them kind of wild, you know, get over here, you know. It was very strategic, you know, like It was, you know, like he could do it in a business suit, you know, like straight. Come on, you know what you did, right? You know what you did, you know. Come on, you know. And then, you know, he took care of business.
I think you and I had similar dads.
But you know, man, discipline is not a four-letter word. It's not. It's not a bad thing. It's really. It's really to protect us and to keep us from doing things that will cause us pain in the long run. You know,
Yeah.
I'd rather get disciplined now than to have to be in the system. You talked about a system, than to have to be put in the system. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people in prison now and in situations, maybe not necessarily even in prison, but I mean that girl that's stuck at home with 8 kids because she didn't get the discipline she needed, you know, by 6 different fathers. You know, that's a form of prison. You know what I mean? Because you can't live. You're stuck. You know, and so I really believe that discipline done the right way trains us and keeps us from being stuck later in life.
Yeah.
Wow, this is like perfect timing. Obviously, I've been muted because y'all probably hear the noise in the back now, and I think it's perfect because what I've learned is that whenever there is a principle shared, you're always going to be tested on whether or not you can either flow with the principle or have you learned the principle yet. And I think about something that you said, Jody, that is so relevant right now, and that is a lot of times discipline is for us as parents. You know what I mean? Like, what is the training right now? Like before the call, I told the kids, hey, I need you guys quiet. Daddy has to get on the call, right? I have one in the background blowing the whistle. I got one right here right now. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, what's the look? So now I'm like, okay, what's the lesson? Right? What's the lesson? But is the lesson for me or is the lesson for him? You get what I mean? So it's like
Oh, yeah.
it's amazing, man, how it works. It works. So am I being disciplined right now? Now I got a puppet behind me.
Well, and you know what? And I love I love that your son popped in, right? Because I think a lot of times we as dads don't give our kids space to be kids.
Mhm.
Right? We have this expectation. Hey, I'm getting on the call. You guys need to be quiet,
Yep.
right? When
Yep.
a kid's just being a kid. I mean, he's having fun. He's hanging
Yep.
with his dad. He's like popping in and out. And, I think sometimes we miss those opportunities as dads to allow the kids to be kids and to grow and experience. And you're going to look back at this someday and go, remember that one time? You're going to laugh about it, right? Yeah.
Yep. So good. So good.
Yeah. Yeah,
And-
I hear you, man. You know, I agree with that. You know, we can tend to be so uptight, and kids kind of remind us, that just relax. You know what I mean? It's not the end of the world. Just relax. What we're seeing right now with your son is it just shows, anybody watching. It just shows anybody watching that it's okay. It's okay. It could be worse. I don't want to say what he could be doing because it might give
Listen, please don't, because he will test it.
but he's hanging out. He's hanging out with dad. You know what I mean? And that's a good sign. If your child wants to be in the room with you, even playfully like that, that's a good sign. And that's unfortunately a lot of people don't have that testimony. And a lot of it has to do with the way we discipline our children.
Yeah, one of the things that Mike talked about there briefly is about our principle. I think a lot of times we as dads, our kids do something wrong or they ask a question and our go-to response is because I said so or because that's just the way it is, instead of teaching the principle behind their question.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Earlier this week, my daughter Cynthia was here and her friend were here, and I I was downstairs and I came upstairs and they were talking about boys and girls and pornography and a bunch of other stuff. And I was like half tuned in, half not, not even wanting to get involved in it. And just out of the blue, my daughter asked me, she goes, "So Dad, do you think pornography is cheating?" I said, "Absolutely." She goes, "Really?" She goes, what if Mom was watching pornography to get ideas to please you?" I'm like, "It's still cheating." And the reason is because when you're watching the pornography, you're imagining being with somebody else. You're imagining doing those things. And so there is a disconnect between your heart and the heart of your sweetheart, because you're imagining being with somebody else. And so absolutely it's cheating. And it would have been easy to go, yes, I just know that it's cheating. But rather than just go to the short answer, I actually explained the principle and the why I felt that. And it enabled us to have a really positive and healthy discussion about, a legitimate question that she had and that her and her friend were exploring. And I think if we as dads take more time to actually talk about the principle behind a question, or a principle behind why we do things as a family, or why I do things as a dad or as a husband, it empowers our children to make healthy choices for themselves as they're navigating their life.
Yeah.
That's a big question, bro, for your daughter to come ask you that. Holy smokes. I don't know how I'd handle that with my daughter. How old is she?
She's 19.
Oh, shoot. My daughter's only 14. I would have blew my
Yeah, but here's the thing, Sean. We have always had an environment. We've always tried to foster an environment in our home where our kids could ask any question, right, and not come down on the hammer. And I think it's important that, and I think this goes to the heart of discipline.
How do you get to that, though, is what I want to know, because I would like to have that,
And that's kind of where I'm going I think in order for you to have that environment, is you have to be disciplined about creating an environment where you can talk about deep things, complicated things, edgy things, right? So Judy and I have never shied away from any conversation, no matter how old the kids were, especially if it related to sex and intimacy and things like that, because we know that they're getting bombarded with other information. If they can't have a safe place where they can talk and explore with that, how are they going to get a counter to the voices that they're hearing? And I think a lot of times too is, as you're building that foundation and your kids start leaving the home, or even in high school, as they start interacting and they start getting pressured to do certain things, being able to have a safe place where they can come back to Mom and Dad and go, "Hey, this is what I encountered. What do you think about it? How could I have handled it better?" And even when you don't like the response, because, I remember there was a point where, this same daughter came to us and wanted to do some things, and Judy and I are like, "I'm not supporting that." She goes, "Well, why not? Because you're my parents, you should be doing that." We're like, "No, and this is why." And while we weren't supportive of what she wanted to do, she understood the reason behind it. She may have not liked it at the time, but I think what it did was it laid the foundation for her to be able to have that question for me this week. Right. So it's continually creating an environment. It's also, I think one of the big things is just being engaged with your kids, just like Mike, his kids bouncing around and behind him, making time for our kids, even when it's not necessarily convenient for us or that situation.
Yeah.
And when they know that they can go to dad, they will go to dad or mom when it's really important.
Yeah. I think too, I was thinking about that question, Shawnee, making them, when they ask questions that aren't as heavy, I know I had a tendency because I've always joked. I mean, from the time I was a kid, I've been a joker. And so, my kids could ask a question and I would, we used to do something back in the day. It's not called this anymore. I don't know what they call it now. I don't want to, expose myself, but it's called panning. And that was just, we would have panning sessions where you get in a group and I say something about you, you say something about me, I say something about your mom, you say something about my mom. So it was always like, I kind of grew up in that era and in that kind of environment. So, one of my boys would say something and I'd be like, that is so stupid, like, what is wrong with you? I mean, just let them have it. And what I didn't realize that it was doing to them was they would laugh and joke too, but underneath it, they would feel like, okay, well, I can't go to dad with this. And so what they would do is they would go to their mom. So then she come to me like, do you talk to them about this? Do you ever have conversations about this kind of stuff with them? And I'm like, no, they don't ask me. She didn't know that there was a reason that they didn't ask me. But when I thought about it later, as I got a little older and a little wiser, more mature, I was like, man, I messed these boys up. They can't even come to me like the question that Jody's daughter came to him with. They couldn't have come to me with that because they didn't feel like they could trust that I would handle it properly. And so I missed out on some really key moments of discipline with them. That's discipline, training them to be able to come to a trusted, secure source of information rather than possibly getting it at school. They could ask a friend at school, hey, is pornography cheating? No, you got to learn, and that's how you learn, and then they take that and they can run with that as opposed to going to a dad, or a mom who could say, no, this is not good. You don't want to do that because what it can do is it can affect your relationship with your spouse. And, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just, they can get it. They can get that information from someone else or they can get it from you. But in order for them to get it from you, they got to know that even in those moments where it's like something silly, they got to know they can trust you. Now, if I had, listened to what they said and answered it, in a way they can trust me, then later on said, that was corny, right? I might be able to do that, but to just come out with it like, oh man, what is wrong with you? What's your problem? Yeah. So I messed up on that.
Well, and I think it's a process, right? I mean, it goes back to us dads being disciples of being a father.
Mm-hmm.
No, how do we learn how to be a father? How do we learn to be a great dad until we're in those situations? Until we're asked the question, until they do something so crazy. I remember, when I wrecked my dad's truck. I felt so. I'm driving back, dreading the conversation with my dad, and I walked into the door. My dad's sitting at the table, and I walk in and I go,
"Wait a minute, Joe. Wait a minute. You drove back home?"
I drove back home after I got the lady's information that I swiped down the entire side of her car.
What'd you say, Antoine? No way.
I would be in Mexico right now.
So I literally drove home and I walked in the door and my dad's sitting at the table eating. And I'm like, Dad, I kind of wrecked your truck. He's like, what do you mean you kind of wrecked my truck? You either wrecked it or you didn't wreck it. And right then I knew he was not going to let me not get by without being held accountable. Right. And I love that question. And it's just really stuck with me. you kind of wrecked it or you did, right? And he, in that moment, in that question, he made me look at myself and go, you have to own this, right? And I think a lot of times we as dads don't ask the question that enables our kids to own their decisions and own the consequences. And when they can do that, it provides an opportunity for them to learn and to grow and to become more than they were yesterday.
Yeah.
So, well, guys, we've been going for a full hour. Anybody have any last words? Yeah, Shawnee.
I have something I want to say for people watching and stuff. There's a couple people on here. So I learned something, just an observation as a martial arts coach. Like I said, I have people coming there. A lot of kids are like, I heard karate teaches people discipline and I want my kids to be more disciplined. Can you teach them? And I'd be like, yeah, bring them in, make sure they get here, 2-3 times a week and we should be all right. Well, what I started to notice is, if parents want to have their kids disciplined, they also have to be disciplined. And us guys here, we have Jesus. We have a path. We know Jesus is the way. So we've tried to follow along with what he wants us to do, with what the Holy Spirit wants us to do. And I learned something as a coach and stuff. Like I was a boxing coach for a while. Discipline is a very deep, deep thing. It goes in all different ways. And the thing is, I don't know, like I said before, I never really knew how to be a good dad because I had nothing to model it off of. But I know one thing for sure, that if we try to live our lives the best and most godly way we can, I believe that God's going to help us along the way and help our kids along the way too. And I have noticed, in my classes and stuff, that a lot of these parents used to get really frustrated because their kids wouldn't pick up the discipline. But what I noticed is that the parents, they weren't very disciplined people themselves. They didn't have they weren't militant about their bedtime. They weren't, they didn't have no rules really. And then they expect their kids to do right and not do everything that they want them to do. Yet they're not really having any discipline in their life themselves. And one of my main complaints as a teacher, which really, there was a couple years there where I got really, really frustrated with it because I had some really, really tough kids that were like young kids that were like, 9, 10 years old area. There was a few kids that were just, man, they were just mean to me, bro. and it was like, I had to get hard on them with like hard discipline. I had a kid, I had him put his feet on a chair and just had him plank like that for 2 minutes. And he was bawling. And his dad left with him in the middle of the punishment. It's like, come on, son. And left with him because I think it was like the embarrassment that the kid couldn't deal with. But I'm like, your wife took him here. The first day he was here, I almost broke one of my students' ribs jumping around. And you wanted me to teach him discipline, but this is what it takes. This is where he's at. He won't listen. He's defiant, like you said. And the thing is we have to, for folks listening and stuff, you have to really analyze where you're at. And if you just have no discipline in your life, whether it's, exercise or whether it's eating or whether it's just waking up in the morning at a regular time and being there with your family, that takes work. And if we want our kids to be worker bees, we got to be a worker bee too. And one thing that I learned is that a lot of the stuff that my kids do and know, they learned it strictly from watching how me and my wife operate. You know what I'm saying? And so I just wanted to add that. So.
No,
yeah, it's interesting, man. I remember, and Mike, you might remember this. We used to run the teens ministry at our church. Me and Mike did, and one of the things that we noticed was that we used to have these things called F5s, where we have this huge thing for teens to come out. And one of the things that we noticed is teaching the teens is that a lot of the parents had a tendency to just drop them off so that we can fix them. And I remember making this statement. I don't know if you remember this, Mike. I said we need to do a session for parents at these events, because, and one of the things that I said to the parents was, we're here to reinforce what they should be getting at home. We're not here to make sure your kids are functioning the way they should. We're here to reinforce what you should be doing for them at home. And so I think about that, what you just said, Shawnee. That's key, because I think that's what happens. A lot of parents take their kids to boxing or to karate or put them in programs, and it's like, you know what, he's a mess, fix him. The only place that might work is the military, and then some of them are so bad that the military is like, nah, come get him, but these organizations that are not designed to raise children, they're not designed to raise and train children in that way from the principles they should be getting at home. They reinforce them, and so discipline starts at home. It starts at home, and you got to help the teachers. You got to help the instructors and those people that they end up facing when they go out those doors, because it's not their responsibility to make sure your children are well adjusted. It's yours.
I love that. As I'm listening to you guys, it really comes down to us, ourselves as dads, becoming the true disciple in our home, right? Of how to be a good father, how to be a good husband. Because as Antoine pointed out, your kids will emulate that which they see.
Mm-hmm.
If they see you disciplined and going after goals and doing things to better yourself, to improve your family, as they get older, they will emulate that, because you are the true model that they are discipling. So what kind of man, what kind of husband do you need to be in order for your kids to respond in a way that you hope they would, that you dream they will? Because it really ultimately starts with you, Dad. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. It's always a great discussion. Guys that are tuning in, please check out Antoine Brown. He's on Twan's Place on TikTok and Instagram. Mike Lewis, he's on Facebook. He's an author, just released a phenomenal book. You got The Lion's Den. And Sean Knauff, every day TikTok, man, he's doing prayer requests. He's, bringing messages of love and encouragement for men and women. And so please go check these guys out. Because they are truly men to emulate. I want to thank you guys for joining me as always. And we will bow out and have you guys have a great night. Go spend some time with your families. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we will check you guys same time just next month. See ya.
God bless.
You guys are great, man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
See you guys. Tell your son happy birthday, bro.
Man, I will.
We should have sung happy birthday to him.
You know what? He's floating around here somewhere.
You guys have a great day, man.
All right, man.
Yep. Later, guys.